Welcome back. You're watching South Africa Tonight here on ENCA. Now, Rwanda has announced that it will allow Africans to travel visa-free to the country, becoming the latest nation on the continent to do so. The move is aimed at boosting the movement of people and trade to rival Europeans' Schengen zone. To unpack this further, the author of Africa's Open for Business is Victor Khomoswana, who joins us now via Zoom. Thank you so much for your time, Victor. We do appreciate it. Maybe just tell us the decision for Rwanda to do this, given I would say, panic that has been created, especially if you look at what's happening in South Africa with our porous borders and the movement of people. This might seem as a good decision and a good move because of what it could bring to the economy of Rwanda.
Good evening, Heidi. It is definitely something that Rwanda started doing very, very long ago. Already 8 years ago, Rwanda had made a decision that they would let anybody with a valid passport from anywhere in the world to be able to get a visa on arrival. And I think at the time, it was something like $30 for a visa on arrival. I remember very well, you didn't fill out any paper. You simply went to the counter at the arrivals, the counter at the airport. They would ask you where you are going, where you're coming from. You show them their passport, they scan you, your facial features, your fingerprints digitally, and they stamp your passport after you've paid the $30. But because Rwanda is targeting high-end tourists, for example, they were charging already 10 years ago $750 to get into the Gorilla Park at Musanze. It's well over $1,000 per person now. They're targeting high-end tourists. I think they figured rather than be processing visas for tourists, why don't we just let them in? Because we know once they're inside Rwanda, they will spend 100 times, if not 1,000 times more than they would be able to spend just getting the visa. So that is the essence of that. But the other reason that Rwanda is able to do this is that they are very confident about their security inside the country. It's one thing to have porous borders or not porous borders, but the one thing Rwanda guarantees is once you're inside Rwanda, nobody will mug you, nobody will do anything to you, and that's the reason they are selling that safety and security, and of course the tourist attraction centers that they're having. They've done their numbers and realized that $50, $60 for a visa is nothing compared to 10,000 that people end up spending once they're inside the country.
And speak to us about how important this move is to also boost economic activity in Rwanda and tourism numbers. I mean, you've briefly touched on it now, but it's definitely going to be a game changer in terms of those two aspects.
It is. Rwanda, if we look back to 2000, they were having just under 2 million travelers arriving in the country. And this was 6 years after the genocide. They have moved, their tourism industry already 5 years ago had surpassed the $500 million mark. So I would hazard a guess that is now well about $1 billion worth, if not just under $1 billion worth. And that's exactly the point. If you look at Rwanda Air and what it is doing, it has flights to France, that is Paris, it's got flights to London, and these are mainly daily flights. And it's got flights to North America, it's got flights to places like Cape Town, it's got flights to Asia. So they are targeting that, but they realize that the more they make it easier for people to get in and out of the country, the better. But I've got to emphasize, they are very strict on security. Just to give you an example, they don't wait until you commit a serious crime, Heidi. They enforce rules like where you may cross the road, what you may do, things like just littering. They are very strict on those basics. And the beauty of such an approach to safety and security or law and order is that if people know that you won't tolerate littering, they understand you will not even think twice about nailing them for mugging someone. And that's why Rwanda is so safe. I've seen women walking by themselves with their jewelry and handbags and cell phones at 11 p.m. and they just don't worry about anything because security is that tight. It's that feature of the country that they are able to sell, and that's why they are confident to let anyone in. It's not like they're just being reckless.
Absolutely. Wouldn't that be great if we could have a life like that here in South Africa, where women could walk freely and not be attacked? Let's just speak about the challenges, though, that this could pose. Victor, if at all, do you foresee any challenges with this kind of move?
I would imagine that because passports involve sharing information and authenticating information from other countries. Because when I arrive at your border gate and all I have is my passport, you have to be able to have reliance on my country's systems. That what it says on the passport is exactly what the story is. So that could be a challenge. But I think if there's any challenge, Heidi, it will put the other countries under pressure to follow suit. Because if they don't, they're just going to leave a lot of money on the table for Rwanda. Because tourists like to have a smooth or seamless experience. And if other countries don't follow suit, it's going to be a challenge. The other reason could be in the name of African Continental Free Trade Area, which presupposes the free movement of goods and services and people, maybe the challenge would be how the African Union will be able to catch up and make that one African Union passport a reality, which has been talked about for at least 6 years. But I think it's only now the diplomats and the high-powered figures that are able to use that African Union passport, the one passport that we should have had a long time ago. If there's any challenge, it's going to be the challenge of integrating systems and, of course, aligning what Rwanda is doing at these border posts with what other countries are doing. Because bear in mind, when you travel, sometimes you have a connecting flight. Now, if you have a connecting flight, but the country to which you are traveling or from which you are traveling doesn't have smooth services at its border posts like that, it might be people are going to be stranded in Rwanda because they might be traveling to another country that requires a visa to be applied for in advance or ahead of traveling, and then it might just create problems. But because they have Rwanda Air, I'm very confident that before they implemented this, they did their homework in those countries that constitute the majority of travelers or inbound travelers to Rwanda. And as long as they get that right, they should be able to pull it off. And I think they will be pulling along the rest of the African Union with them.
Absolutely, and I think it's so imperative that Africa looks after Africa, isn't it, Victor? And maybe we can just end off on that note to speak about how important it is for African countries to bring solutions to African problems. You know, looking at how Europe does things is not the solution because our problems differ. And there's so much beauty on this continent. We need to bring as many people as possible, obviously done in a responsible manner, isn't it?
Yes, think about it like this, Heidi. At the moment, all African exports are 20% or less to other African countries. Less than 20%, which means there's only the upside for us to move from here onwards. The essence of an African country demonstrating that you can work out a visa-free travel regime and get other people to follow suit is exactly what we need. If we are able to do it, we will be saying Rwanda managed to do it. Why can't we? I think the Seychelles is already on that kind of a dispensation. Heidi, I mustn't create the impression that Rwanda is the first. And the Seychelles, as you know, is also a high-end tourist destination. That's why they had to lead. And I think the Gambia is another country that's on that kind of a tip. The Gambia, if you recall, is a river that runs through Senegal. And these countries that are dependent on tourism are the first one to get off the mark. I'm sure Mauritius will likely follow suit because it is also that dependent on tourism. But as long as we are imitating African countries, it's exactly what we need, African solutions to African problems.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your insights. We really do appreciate it. That was Victor Khomoswana, who's the author of Africa's Open for Business, speaking to us tonight about Rwanda now allowing Africans to enter the country visa-free or to not have to apply for a visa.